for cold, hard sports talk with your hosts, Ty Gore, Matt Barrett, and Jake Woods.
Okay, boys. Excellent guest here today.
Easy,
he is our
Matt.
he's our second broadcaster, second WHL broadcaster to be on the podcast. Former voice of the Melford Mustangs, Nipawin Hawks, Humboldt Broncos for a period of time.
Yeah, that was my first year. Yep.
Yeah, Verdun Oil Capitals for a brief period of time as well, and now the Branden Kings.
A lot of people say he was Matt Barrett before Matt Barrett was Matt Barrett.
Yeah,
I paved the way for Matt Barrett.
Exactly.
Without me, Matt Barrett doesn't exist.
Yeah, you walked so that Matty B could run.
Exactly. That's the way I like to put it. Yeah.
Anyways, this is Branden Crowe, who is currently in the bubble in Regina for the WHL. Crowbar, thanks for doing this, man. This is a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm glad I was so well thought of that you guys gave me like 3-4 weeks notice to come on. I know how busy you guys are, so I'm glad to do it. Glad to do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of scheduling involved here. Obviously, two
My
very
people,
busy
your
people. A lot of intense negotiations, trying to find the right dollar price to get this going. It was like trying to book a Floyd Mayweather fight. Like there's just months of negotiations, lots of social media campaigns to try and get,
we had to call Crowe's agent, Cam Lee. So
yeah, you guys, you could have texted me like anytime. Literally this hub has been there is so much downtime and free time. I'm starting to go a little squirrely. I'll be honest with you. Like it's there's not a lot going on when your team's not playing, and you're not like. So for example, when Brandon's not playing, I can't go to the rink if we have one of our managers in the rink. So like we have like 1 seat, 2 seats maybe. So our assistant GM's here watching the game between PA and I think Saskatoon tonight. So I can't go. So I just have to sit around, and it's a lot of TV watching, a lot of reading, and oh man, it's starting to get a little repetitive. I'll say that.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the bubble first.
Yeah.
Like, what's the Regina bubble like? And give us the inside scoop.
Okay, so it's. I don't want to use the word bubble because it's not really a bubble. It's more of a controlled environment. That'll be the word I will use because, for example, like I can go, like I just was showing you, like I can go to Subway. I can go grab a bite to eat wherever. Like I can go grocery shopping. I can come and go as I please. But the players and the staff, they are in I guess you can use the word bubble in that case. They are at the university in their dorm rooms, and then they're bused to the arena. Back and forth. That's it. Every bit of food is brought into them, but they're not allowed out. So basically they are locked into their bubble. I don't see any of them. I do the odd grocery run for the team, but I have to like drop the groceries off in like a designated drop-off spot. Usually it's funny because usually what'll happen is like the equipment manager, I'll pull up to the building and I can see him through the doors. He'll hit the handicap button on the doors and roll a laundry cart out into the parking lot. And then I'll like set the stuff in it that they need. And then I'll roll it back to them at the door and then away they go. So it's pretty neat that way in a sense that the players are completely 100% all hockey. Myself, I'm in a hotel with like a bunch of the NHL scouts and other team staff and some of the officials and that. So I'm not technically in the hub. I've got a lot more freedom than the players and staff do, but so far it's working. Knock on wood. We've got about 3 weeks left. And so far we haven't had any real incidents of any anybody even really overly sick with the sniffles or anything like that. Like guys have stayed pretty healthy during this, so that's a good sign.
And you get to call hockey games, which is pretty good in itself.
It's a privilege, man. Like I'll tell you, you and I talked. I don't know. We were doing a podcast for one of our Melford friends' school class at SAIT, and you and I were talking last week, and both of us basically had our entire livelihoods just kind of taken away, like a lot of people have in this thing. And for myself, we had a game March 7th of 2020. It was a game against PA. We lost. And then we had our team picture day on the Wednesday, and we were getting set for a game against Regina on the Friday. And that was canceled, postponed. And 3 weeks later, I got laid off. And that was it. I was unemployed. So it all happened in a hurry. So to be able to be back here in the hub, I don't care. I'd be locked in a cell without windows if it meant I could do my job. So there's no complaints on my end, not at all. Yeah. But This will be something unique that for the next, for the rest of these players' careers, this is something they're going to remember for a long time.
Yeah. Well, enough about the Hubble, if we will. We want to talk a little bit about you, and because I know you've got a lot to tell us, I'm gonna crack another beer here. And so tell us about your hockey playing career. It's probably a very short story, right?
Very short. I grew up in small town Manitoba. I grew up in two towns, actually. I grew up in Neepawa till grade 9, and then my dad took another job, so I moved down to Boisvane. So to put that into sports perspective, Neepawa is home of Shane Knighty, who's the Vegas color guy, and a longtime NHLer with Ottawa. Boisvane, I don't think there's an NHLer from Boisvane, to be completely honest with you. I don't think there's ever been one. I'd have to look that up.
About as close as it gets, hey?
No, Christ, no. I was a goalie. I played goal in minor hockey. And when it came time to play, to graduate to the kind of midget age, we had just moved, my first year eligibility of midget, we moved in September from one region to another. And unlike Saskatchewan or Alberta, in Manitoba, you have to play AAA midget in the region which you live. That's the only way. You can't go try out for another team. If you live there, you play on that team. So it was a tough transition leaving one region to go to another at that exact tryout time. So I didn't get a chance to try out in Yellowhead. And by the time I got settled in and everything was down in Southwest, they'd already made the team. So I just said, all right, well, I'll go play high school hockey. And that's where I finished. I played high school hockey. I played a couple years of college hockey in the Manitoba Athletics Conference and with the Assiniboine College Cougars, which folded shortly after we won the championship as a result of some derelict behavior that is probably not for publication. But the team doesn't exist anymore, so that can tell you we partied hard when we won the championship.
Do you have the ring on you? Do you have a ring? Did you guys
you know what? We didn't get rings, but we got jackets. So that tells you how big the budget was. But other than that, that's really it. I did have one junior A exhibition game under my belt because at 16 I got invited to Neepawa Natives camp, and I played in a rookie game against Wayway, and I gave up 4 goals in the first period and a half, and that was the end of my career. So,
on how many shots though?
I don't remember. I feel like it had to be very few if I don't remember. I'm trying to block that memory out of my head.
Right.
But that was it. That was it.
So when did you think or decide or I guess consider that media and broadcasting was kind of something that you kind of were like, hey, this is kind of cool?
Well, I remember one of my buddies, one of my best friends to this day, his dad built a brand new shop out at the farm, the paved, the concrete floor. And it was such a big shop that even with all his farm equipment in there was still half the shop where we could play ball hockey. And so I remember all of us just every weekend we're there, shooting pucks and playing road hockey in this shop, and you could play year round because it was insulated and heated. It was great. And I remember that exact time, kind of the Mighty Ducks movies had kind of really hit the stride. D2 and D3 were
you're aging yourself here.
Yeah, they were the cat's ass. And I remember, so Bob Miller, the former voice of the LA Kings, did the play-by-play in those movies. Even back to the very original, when you hear the fake play-by-play. That's Bob Miller, who just retired as voice of the LA Kings throughout all of those movies. And for whatever reason, when those movies came out, I was like, man, that guy sounds awesome. I like that guy. So then I remember just kind of doing joking play-by-play when we were screwing around doing the, playing street hockey and stuff. And all my buddies would always ask me to do it. And it was always kind of the thing where I wouldn't play. I'd just go sit on the side on a 5-gallon pail and do play-by-play while everyone else was playing. So that was kind of when I was like, oh, this is cool. But I never comprehended that I could do it for a job. That just didn't make sense. So when I moved down to Boisvane, one of my best friends there, Mike Lamb, he's a morning guy in Brandon. His dad, Barry Lamb, is a legend in the media world in Manitoba, longtime TV, radio reporter. He ran the radio station in Boisvane, a small little Golden West station. And so Mike and I interned in grade 12. We had to do a work placement thing. And in there I went. And that was kind of the first time I was like, man, people get paid to talk about sports. This is cool. So from there, I just said, you know what, I'm going to go to broadcasting school and see what happens. And because I really didn't have another plan. I never wanted to be anything really. I didn't have any ambitions or goals. I kind of was just floating through life, just having fun. And I didn't, I wasn't a typical kid that said I want to be a teacher or a doctor or anything. I just kind of thought I would figure it out as I went.
Or an accountant.
Yeah, exactly. I can't even total up the period shots in my head. I got to use a calculator, so that wasn't a good idea.
You take your shoes off to count them, right?
Exactly. So I went to school for it, and then once I did my first couple of shows in college, you're terrible at it and you're just learning. That's when I was like, man, this is cool. So from there, it kind of took off. So it was all entirely organic. Nothing happened because someone told me I should do it. It was kind of just, I kind of fell into it more than anything.
You're kind of like, hey, I'm kind of good at this thing. I might as well try and see where I can go with it.
And I also knew I wanted to be involved in hockey, but I wasn't good enough to play. So I thought, well, maybe, maybe about coaching or like managing, or maybe I'd go to school to become a trainer or an equipment guy, or, I kind of wanted that path a little bit, scouting maybe, but I didn't know what I was good at. And that's just kind of the path that I kind of fell into.
Well, and so once you were done at school, tell us, maybe the story, because your first job is in Saskatchewan, in Melford, where I currently am now. So tell us how you managed to find your way to the heartland of Saskatchewan.
Completely by accident, which is, okay, this story doesn't happen very often like that.
Okay.
So in my call at ACC Broadcasting School in Branden, in my second year of the 2-year program, you had to have, I want to say 30 hours of real life media experience, and you had to coordinate it yourself. So that meant like calling the newspaper and, following them around or helping on the printer, going to the TV station. You just had to find your own kind of practicum type thing. And at the time, my buddy Ward Susky, who had the shop that we played hockey in, he was playing for Humboldt at the time. And so his parents were coming up to watch a playoff series against Melford. And I thought, well, why don't I just tag along with them? I can watch the game, and maybe the radio station will sign off on a few hours. I can go sit in the press box and I can get a couple of free hours out of it. So I looked up, who the Humboldt Melford radio station was. And it was CJVR, CK750. And I called the newsroom just out of the blue, hoping to reach Daryl Skender, who was the play-by-play guy at the time. And Daryl answered the phone, and he's an old Army guy, and he's a very straight shooter. There's no fucking around with Daryl. And he said to me, he's like, no, I don't need any help. And I was like, okay, well, there goes that. And it was like, I said, hi, Daryl, I'm Branden Crowe. This is what I'm trying to do. He's like, no, we don't need any help. And I was like, okay. But then as I was about to, say goodbye and hang up, he goes, hold on. We had a girl quit today. Do you want a job? And I was like,
knowing nothing about you?
He knew nothing about me. He didn't know. He knew my name. And that was it. He goes, and I could hear Cam, your old boss, in the background saying like, whoa, Daryl, let's just hold on.
Because Cam was technically his boss, correct?
Cam was his boss. He ran the newsroom. So at this time, Daryl's basically said, do you want a job? And I was like, well, you don't know any, I said, I'd love a job, but what kind of job? And he's like, well, let me put you in touch with Cam. He'll tell you what to do. So anyway, a couple days go by, and I talked to Cam, and he's like, well, I guess Daryl kind of already offered you a job. Like, are you interested? And I said, sure, why not? So this was the last week of March. So I still had a couple of months left of school. And I said to the teacher, I said, like, what happens? I've got a job offer, but I don't want to not graduate. And he said, our goal at this program is to get you a job in the media. And if that means you have to leave early, then see you later. So away I went. I packed everything I owned into my Pontiac Sunfire, and I drove to Melford for $628 every 2 weeks. That was my paycheck. And my rent was $800. So I wasn't getting very far. But yeah, that was it. It was literally, again, completely by accident. And after about 6 months of reading the news and the weather, Daryl got recommissioned back into the military. And at the time, he was doing play-by-play for Humboldt, Nipawin, and the U of S Huskies football team. And they had another fellow there named Gino DePaoli who was doing the Melford games. And at the time, play-by-play, I was like, man, I got to go through two guys before I get a chance here. And Daryl got recommissioned to the military in the same week that Gino got a call from the sister station Whitecourt to go do AJHL games. So after 6 months of reading the news and the weather, I'm now the play-by-play guy of 3 junior A teams and a university football team with no experience at all.
And the Tisdale Trojans once in a while too, right?
Yeah, and the odd midget game with zero experience other than like a handful of AAA midget games on the local access channel at home in Branden. So it all happened like super fast. And to top it all off, Humboldt was hosting the RBC Cup that year, and I was going to be broadcasting every single game of their season, every single playoff game, and every game of the tournament, even games that didn't involve them, on the Hockey Canada webcast with zero experience. So it was wild. Let me tell you, it all happened in a hurry.
Do you remember your first game?
I do. It was September 21st of 2011. And I only remember that because it was in La Range. And it was a Nipawin
beautiful
hockey
rink.
Yeah, it's a shithole for lack of a better term. But I didn't know this. I Googled La Range and the rink looked okay on Google. So it was a Nipawin game against La Range. And so I told them I would meet them somewhere. I can't remember what it was. Maybe I was meeting them in, I don't remember why.
Choiceland, maybe?
Yeah, Choiceland maybe, or White
yeah.
Fox or something. So anyway, I jump in the station vehicle with all my gear and I'm going up there. I park, I wait. I get on the bus, first time ever on a junior hockey bus, and away we go to La Range. And I'm wearing I bought a new suit, right? I'm thinking, man, I got to look good here. So I get to La Range and I realize that wearing a suit you just don't have to in La Range. Yep. And I was like, man, this is a bad idea. So I start climbing up the ladder. I rip my suit. It gets caught on a nail. And I'm thinking, okay, we're in trouble here. And nobody had told me that when you go to La Range, you're literally sitting on plywood. And your stuff sits beside you and I wasn't
We'll put a video out on our social medias. I have a video of the press box. We'll put it out on social.
It's very, I don't even know. You're literally above the bench and you're just sitting there on a piece of plywood. There's no table in front of you, no nothing. Yeah. The roof is dripping moisture and
not anymore.
It's very uncomfortable. And 35 minutes into my first ever junior A hockey game, Tad Kozin, who's playing pro down the East Coast League, one of the best Nipawin Hawks of the modern generation, crashed hard into the goaltender of the La Range Icewolves and started a massive line brawl. Full on, 5-on-5 actual, mitts off
something you'd
line
see
brawl.
In the 80s, 90s.
Yeah, and here I am calling this, trying to describe what's going on, and it was just chaos. Anyway, the game ended, and the bus is all fired up, and everybody's, hooting and hollering or whatever, and I checked my email after the game, and it's an email from the league asking me if I have the audio from that fight and what all happened, because there was a lot of things being said on both benches that the coaches, I can't remember which way it worked, but somebody was saying some very inappropriate things, and it wasn't just regular swearing. It was I don't want to use the word racist, but it was very inappropriate, questionable
offside.
Stuff was being, very offside stuff was being hollered out. And so the league asked me for the audio from that. So I've done one game and all of a sudden I'm on the discipline radar for punishment. So aside from that, I don't remember who won the game. I don't remember anything. I just remember Tad Kozin ran into the goalie and it started a huge thing. But that was my first game in La Range, Nipawin La Range, September 21st of 2011. I will never forget that game.
Wow. Now, how did you handle doing 3 teams, a university football team, and the odd midget game here or there, while still doing the news?
Man, it was very difficult because at the time when Gino left, when Gino and Daryl were there, they could share the load. So if Daryl went to do a football game, Gino would do a hockey game.
Hockey. Yeah.
Or if there was 2 hockey games in a night, Daryl would do one, Gino would do the other, and they'd have one on the AM station and one on the FM station. And once those 2 guys left, it was just me and Cam. And Cam wasn't doing play-by-play; he was doing the morning news. So Cam was on the horn trying to find an intern and trying to find replacements. And so that was September 21st. That was my first game. And I'd have to look back in my notes, but I believe I did 114 games that year. And it was literally every night. The league played, there was no Monday games ever in the SJ, but they played Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But they never played on Monday for whatever reason. And so I was going every other day, if not every day. And then when the weekends rolled around, I'd have to I'd fly to UBC on Friday morning. I'd call an afternoon game at UBC Saturday afternoon, fly back to Saskatoon, then jump on the bus Sunday morning to go to Flin Flon and call a game Sunday night in Flin Flon and come back. It was a lot. And I was young. I was 18, 19 years old. I was loving every minute of it. I don't think I realized how much I was actually doing until it was all said and done, because luckily Melfort was not good that year, so they didn't make the playoffs, and that alleviated that. The U of S Huskies lost in the first round of the playoffs, so they were done. And then Nipawin lost in the first round, so they were done. And then I could just focus on Humboldt. And from that point on, I did every Humboldt game all their playoff games. They went to Game 7 of the league final, Game 7 of the Anavet Cup against Portage, and then they played, I want to say 9 games at the RBC Cup, right to the semifinal of the RBC Cup. And I did every game that included teams that weren't Humboldt. So I would do like BC versus AJ. And finally, about halfway through that tournament, I said to Cam, like, I need some help here. And because I was getting burnt out. And so he brought in a couple of guys just on contract freelance to do some of the non-Humboldt games. And that just
like other SJHL teams or something.
Yeah. Like he just called in some guys, called in some favors and said, like, can you do this afternoon BC versus AJ game so that he can have a rest kind of thing. And then we had another guy come in. Tommy West was his name. He was an intern that came in. So he came along and did a whole bunch of color for me. We had him between the benches. Cam came and did some color for me. I tried to have as many color guys as I could to save myself because it was a lot. Looking back on it now, I can't believe that it all happened. And like, there was never really a conflict. Like the way they scheduled the games, it was just crazy how I'm sure teams were annoyed at some point that I was doing so much. I know the Nipawin Hawks hated it. And they still, to this day, I mean, I did get invited to their alumni golf tournament, which I was shocked about, but they didn't like it because they obviously, your team, you want your guy to do all the stuff. And I was being pulled in every which direction. So it was nuts. Yeah, it was like 114 or 115 games or something like that over the course of like September to March. So it was a lot.
That's so wild. Like, was there one point where your voice is almost like, am I going to be able to do a game tonight?
Yeah. But a lot of that was my own doing because I partied hard that first year. Like when you're the same, and you kind of know this when you came to Melford, when you're the same age as the players, like, when I got to Melford that first year, like Bo Leonard and there was a bunch of guys, 20-year-olds, they just partied at the house I lived at. Like you just become one of the boys, right? Like I was right in there like a dirty shirt. Like when I was with the football team, man, those guys were unreal. I would go with the football team everywhere, and they just like brought me along like their little pet, and they would lie to the girls at the bar that I was one of the team members. Like they'd say like I was a special teams guy or something just to like I mean they could probably tell by looking at me that I wasn't, but like I would just go like, man, the nightlife that a university football player goes through when you play Saturday but you're staying over, when that game's over Saturday at like 4:00 and you don't have a flight till Sunday at noon, she is all systems go. And so
green light.
Yeah, green light. And the rule was, and Brian Towers is a legendary coach, he's in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. The rule was you can do whatever the hell you want as long as you're on the bus the next morning. That's the only rule. Just don't get arrested and be on the bus the next day. I don't care where you go. So it was a lot of fun, and I did a lot of damage to myself that year. And I don't know how I pulled it off. Like just to beat your body up like that, running on no sleep, flying all over, drinking. I'm sure I was smoking at different points. You know how that goes. That's not real good for the voice. But yeah, it was tough. When it was all said and done, Humboldt lost in the semifinal. I called the final between Penticton and Woodstock. Penticton won. And I packed up my gear. I drove back to the radio station. I put it in the garage, and I drove straight home to Winnipeg. And I was just done for like a month. I just shut off. And I just took like a month off. So I learned a lot that year, though, on how to not act. and
you lived with Gino DePaoli, who is currently the voice of the Okotoks Oilers.
Correct.
Any good stories about him?
Dibbles. Gino Dibley. I love Gino like a brother. He was my first roommate ever. When I went to college, I lived alone. So I'd never had a roommate before. And the day I got to Melford, like I said, I loaded up my car, my little Sunfire. I didn't even have a bed. I brought an air mattress. And I got to the house, and it was owned by the radio station at the time.
Ken Singer.
Yeah, and so they just recycled people through there. And so I got to the door, and I knocked, and he didn't answer. I just heard him yell. He was like, "What?" So I like opened the door, and I was like, "Hi, I'm moving in." He's like, "Okay." And he was literally just sitting there playing MLB The Show on this chair. And he never moved. So I moved everything I had into the house. He never showed me which room was mine. He just pointed and grunted. And like, that was it. I was like, man, this guy's like real Mr. Personality here. And yeah, so that was it. He never helped me move in, nothing. And boy, did we have some fun though. Like we partied hard, man. That guy, there was never an off night in that house. The best part about Gino though was that he hated that I would get to work before him. Like he didn't like, I think he felt like maybe I was the new guy and I was kind of showing him up a little bit, and he'd been there for a little longer. So I'd get up early, I was excited for a new job. I'd shower and I'd get to the station. Well, I'd get to the station early, and then like 15 seconds behind me, Gino would come barreling in the door, but he hadn't dried off like out of the shower. So like he'd be sitting there with his dress shirt on, just soaked, and his hair, like he'd still have freaking bubbles in his hair when he was like sitting there, and he's like, all right, I'm here. What are we doing today? And Cam's like, Jesus, Gino, like, what are you doing? Like, just take your time, man. But he hated that I would get there before him. And so I'd start like going a little bit earlier every day to see how far I could push it. And
how far did you push it?
Finally, like one day it was like 45 minutes. 45 minutes early, he just wasn't coming. So he was, I think after that, he was like, there's no way. So he started drying off and finishing his showers and not speeding, to get to the station at the same time as me. So yeah, Gino's awesome. We still talk to this day. Still got a lot in common. We'd share a lot of hockey stories, and he's just one of those guys that, you meet along the way. He's a funny character, and you got some funny stories from living with him and working with him and just being around him as long as I was.
Now, what I'm curious about here is what's your connection with Matty B, and do you have any good Matty B stories for us?
Oh man, I have to think about this. Like, okay, you might have to correct me on this, Matt. So when I left, they replaced me with Scott Roblin, correct? Yes. Okay, so Cam and I hired a fellow by the name of Scott Roblin, who's now the evening host on Chat TV.
He's in Medicine Hat. Yeah.
And he's doing color for Bob Ridley with the Medicine Hat Tigers. Yeah. And then he left, and they hired Matt. So,
end of the regular season, by the way.
Right. So I never actually had a direct hand in actually hiring Matt, other than Cam had sent me, the boss at the time had sent me a bunch of demos of guys, and Matt's was one of them. And he said, what do you think? Who should we hire? And his stuff was good. There was lots of, I think a couple of the other guys are actually working in Junior A as well that applied for that job at the same time. So I'm trying to think. I know Darnell Duff was one of them. He's in Dauphin.
Oh, yeah.
A couple guys out in BC, one of them in Alberta. But there was a good collection of you guys that applied. But I didn't really have a direct say in it. I do remember the first time I met you, I think, was in the summertime. I'd come up to visit, and you were around. But we've never actually
summer there, I think.
Yeah, we've never actually worked together on any projects or anything.
No.
Just meeting and passing and visiting at the radio station. Other than that,
I think I sent you some pictures and audio from like the TELUS Cup regional a few years ago. But
we've gotten into a few fish bowls at Boston Pizza a few times after some Raider games. Normally, with my connection to Melford, when Branden plays Prince Albert, I'll drive myself. That way, after the game, I can stay in Melford and hoop it up with the old gang. And maybe that was pre-COVID, obviously. But yeah, we've gotten into a few over the years. But yeah, that's about it for my connection with him.
Yeah. There's some good Matty B stories, but I just won't say them right now. We'll have to get some more people on to give some of those stories. But there's one story that I want to hear, and it's with your time with the Nipawin Hawks.
Okay.
I've heard this story from Cam on a multitude of occasions. It has to do with Subway, and we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
What's this story?
So as you know, the communities in small towns normally don't like each other. Right. So you've got your rivalries, your community rivalries. Well, Melford and Nipawin's no different. And like I said, I was the radio guy for both teams. So, I'm riding on both buses, right? There's a lot of confidential things that get said on buses. So it's weird, right? Imagine being a team coach, like the Nipawin Hawks head coach at the time, Doug Johnson, and being on the bus knowing that Melford and Humboldt's radio guy's sitting right behind you. You know what I mean? Like, I totally understand it now. At the time, I didn't think anything of it, but it'd be weird. Like, it'd be like, if Vegas's plane was going to Colorado and Colorado's radio guy's sitting on the plane with them, right? Like, the coaches aren't going to talk about what they would normally talk about because it's, they've got a spy on their hands, right? And that wasn't the case. I wasn't sharing any information or anything like that. So there was always a little bit of hostility between the Hawks and myself. And the difference between Melford and Nipawin at the time was that Melford ate like kings. Like, when we went on the road, like, that team ate well. Like, it was
still eat well.
Dry ribs and Caesar, nice pastas, good meals, real good meals. But in Nipawin, budget constraints, whatever, it was always like really shitty jailhouse pizza from like L'Orange or Flint or just Subway. But Subway's fine. I love Subway. I'm a big Subway guy. But they would hand a clipboard out before you got to your destination, and you had to write your order on the clipboard. So then the bus would pull into the town, and Doug would hand it into the Subway on the way to the rink. And we'd go. Well, then Subway would the bus driver would go back to Subway and collect this box of subs after the second period. And when you got on after the game, you had this sub. Well, a game goes long. You got overtime, a shootout. By the time the guys are done showering, those subs have been sitting there for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So I was getting sick of it, right? And I'm eating a lot of fast food at this point. Like between traveling and all over, I'm over it. So one game, and the guys always fucked with me all the time because I was, I was just the radio guy. I was kind of the dorky guy. They did whatever they wanted. So I was always the last name on the list. So I'd write my name down and I'd hand it back up to the front. Well, somewhere between me and the front, they'd always like cross out what I wanted and like, put like tuna and a hot sauce and like just make the worst sub possible. And so that's what I would have to eat. So this happened like 2 or 3 times and I was starting to get annoyed and I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be that guy. So I had mentioned it to Tad Cozen. His brother Taryn was the goalie. Of course, Taryn is playing pro now. I think he's on like his 9th team this year.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. But anyway, I had mentioned to them what was going on. And their mom, Colleen, man, she's a great lady. She started packing extra food for me in Taryn's lunch kit. Not lunch kit, but, his road bag. So she packed like an extra sandwich in there, some extra cookies or a banana, just to make me feel good, right? And so one game, I can't remember where we were leaving Larange, and I had absolutely enough of this Nipawin Hawks sub bullshit. So I get my sub and I open it up and it's just like tuna and hot sauce. Like that's it. There's nothing else on it. And I'm like, all right. So I stand up and I was like, okay, which one of you assholes did this again? Like, this is it. I'm drawing the line. Like,
oh no,
no more. And at this point, Doug, I should have known my place. What am I doing? So I'm the radio guy. Like, shut up. So at this point, Doug, the head coach, is like, what the fuck is your problem? And I said, Doug, for the last 3 road trips, your team has been screwing with me, and I've had nothing to eat after the game but this shitty sub. And he's like, is there food in front of you? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, then eat it and shut up. And at this point, I'm mad, right? So I'm sitting behind Taryn, and I'm like, he's sitting there, and I'm reaching over into his lunch pail, pulling stuff out, and Doug's like, sit down. I told you to sit down and eat your food. And I'm just furious at this point. So I was like, I turned around, I was like, all right, boys, let's take a survey. And at this point, I know I'm walking on thin ice. And I said, last night, I was in Larange with Melford. Want to know what we had post-game? We had dry ribs and Caesar salad, boys, and it was delicious. And then we stopped at a gas station, and we got to go in and buy some candy and some drinks on the way home. I said, let's take a vote. Who would have rather had that than this shitty Subway? Well, at this point, I can just see the smoke coming out of Doug's ears. Meanwhile, because half the players like have their hand up sheepishly, like, yeah, I'd want dry ribs and Caesar. And anyway, at this point, Doug is just fuming and just yelling at me to sit down and shut up and mind my own business, whatever. And the bus is kind of laughing. And so Taryn at this point, like, realizes I'm in trouble. So he reaches over the seat and hands me the last few things out of his mom's lunch pail. And Doug goes, Taryn, what are you doing? Taryn's like, well, my mom packed him lunch because she'd heard what we were doing. So at this point, he's just furious now because it's now this whole what happens on the road stays on the road has now gotten into the parents, right? And that just looks bad, right?
Right.
It just doesn't look good. So Doug's furious. I get off the bus, and that was the last time I ever rode the bus with the Nipawin Hawks. And Doug and at this point, we brought on another guy to do some play-by-play. And Doug was like, whatever. I don't care if this guy doesn't even speak English. The other guy is going to be our radio guy for the remainder of the year, and Crowe will not step foot on our bus. And I explained to the radio station what had happened. And they said, there's probably a better way you could have handled that, but we understand, we'll let it slide. They can have the other guy. You focus on Melford, Humboldt, and the football. And so then for the next 3 years, every time I had to interview Doug, it was just painful. He would give me nothing, or he wouldn't even answer the office door. Like he just had this hatred on for me. So they have their golf tournament last summer, and I get an invite to it. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what is happening here? Like they're trying to bend some fences. So I'm walking across the evergreen practice green in Nipawin, and Doug's coming the other way, and we cross paths, and he gives me like the head nod. That's it. Not a word. And I'm thinking, man, this guy still hates me, right? He still hates me, and I can't figure out why. So finally, last year, after that golf tournament, I'm talking to another hockey guy in the league, in the Junior A world. Now he's in the Western League, and I said, man, like, what's the scoop with Doug Johnson? Like, is he going to hold this grudge forever? Like, I was young and stupid, like, whatever. And he goes, I talked to Doug about it. He says he doesn't have a problem with you anymore, and he actually thinks you're pretty good at radio. He's just holding that defending his Hawks territory kind of grudge. Right. So he may never admit it, but I've heard it secondhand that he's okay with me now, and I'm all right with it. So, but yeah, I got banned from the bus, and that was the last time I ever stepped foot on the bus. I didn't eat my sub, but that was it.
Wasn't there, like, didn't you have to actually send your color guy in to do interviews with him at times?
Yep. When Melford or Humboldt would play Nipawin, I wasn't allowed to do the interviews. So somebody else would have to do them, or somebody would have to call him from the radio station that wasn't me and pre-record them because he wouldn't do them.
So sometimes it'd be, I'm going to name drop here, Tony Dagerness, Colton Yarich.
Yeah, any of those guys.
Those guys.
Yeah, whoever it was had to do the interview because he wasn't doing it with me. So, and at one point I just stopped trying. Like I'd knock on his door and he'd answer it and he'd just shut it. Like he just so. Like I like Doug and I think he's done a great job in Nipawin. Yeah. You know, if he drafted my son, I'd send him up to play for Doug. 100% I would. But for whatever reason, he holds that grudge against me. And I'm sure someday at a golf tournament or somewhere in the hockey world, we'll run into each other and have a laugh about it. But yeah, to this day, he's never said a word about that incident ever. I've never heard one word from him. So,
well, the other team that you called games for a lot of the time was the Melford Mustangs.
Correct.
And they have another coach by the name of Trevor Blevins.
Correct.
And he was there for, I guess, half of your tenure.
Yeah, I had one.
2, 3, like couple.
I had 2.5 years with Gavin Holcomb and 2.5 years with Trevor Blevins.
Okay, so Trevor, I will tell kind of a little anecdotal story here. So Trevor, this is like my first full season with the Mustangs. We're in Yorkton. I think we're either going to Yorkton or coming back. I think we're on our way to Yorkton. I get on the bus and I'm sitting on the bus. Guys are up putting their stuff away and whatever. Trevor and Danny are out having a talk and whatever. They come back in. Danny walks on, sits down. Trevor comes up. He's like, "Where's Matt? Where's Barrett?" Looking around. I'm like, "What's up?" He looks at me and he goes, "Get the fuck off my bus." I'm like, because he had messed with me before.
But he likes to play mind games.
Yeah, and he says, "Get the fuck off my bus, Matt. I'm serious. Get off my bus." And I'm like, and I'm looking at Justin Rempel, who's the trainer at the time, and he's standing up and he's kind of like looking around. Jarrett Schneider sitting in front of me, trying to hold in a laugh, and I'm kind of looking around, like, what is going on? He's like, "Get off my bus." And he kind of looks at me and he's like, I can't hold it. You're close. And he starts laughing at me that like I was that close to getting off of his bus because he'd pulled that joke before.
Had you gotten off, he 100% would have left without you and drove around the block just to mess with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that being said, do you have any good Trevor stories like that?
Oh man.
He would always he would always like interrupt my interviews first. So if I'm interviewing him, he'd start the interview by saying, "Matt, you suck at radio," or whatever he'd say. He'd say something sarcastic to just mess with me. Right? He still does it to this day.
Trevor and I's relationship is a little different than most.
Okay.
I would say that it was great for 2 of the 2.5 years that I worked with. I mean, I was the business guy, so I basically ran the business side of the team while doing the radio. So I was involved in a lot of things. Like I spearheaded the rebuilding of the dressing room in Melford. I helped redesign the dressing room in Melford. I damn near helped build it, fixed it. Like I was doing everything. Like at one point I was like, I missed a pregame show in Notre Dame one time because I was sharpening skates because they didn't bring a trainer with them. So I missed 15 minutes of a pregame show because I was sharpening skates. So like I was doing everything for that team and that team will forever be, close to my heart. But near the end, there was a lot of stuff that went on that, just personal things that we just didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. And, it was a cordial end. I left to return closer to home to work in Verdun, which was a great opportunity for me and to be closer to home, but do the same thing I was doing. And, he obviously still had success. He won the next year and whatever. And we've talked a couple of times since then, but it's certainly not the same as when we were originally working together. But he was he could mind fuck like nobody else I have ever met in my entire life. And I mean mostly in a joking way.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
You'd ask him a question, and you'd be live on the radio. Like he'd be sitting beside you live on the air and you'd ask him a question and he would just stare at you. No answer and just stare. And I was like, are you going to answer this? Or like, what's going on? And then he'd wait till I was about to speak and then he'd start speaking. Like just to mess with me a little bit. Like, and so he was always messing with my head. It was a lot of fun. Like, I mean,
we went on your toes, right?
Yeah. It was just a fun environment, like to be around. I mean, we went all the way to the Western Canada Cup in Fort McMurray and, played in the qualifying game there, got in, qualified for the RBC Cup in Portage, which was arguably one of the greatest moments in Melford Mustang history other than when they hosted in 96. So, I mean, we've shared a lot of great memories and a lot of great moments together, but that was a long time ago. Nothing sticks out with Trevor quite like it did with Doug, because Trevor and I we were on the same page on a lot of things, and Trevor and Doug didn't get along. So the fact that I pissed off Doug as much as I did, that made me like closer to Trevor. Like he liked that I irritated the opponent. So I mean, I love to see that they're still doing well. And I mean, it breaks my heart that the season had to be shut down the way it did. I've still got my championship ring from the year that they won in 2015. It sits in my trophy case next to my wife's NCAA championship ring, and you can fit mine inside hers because that's how much bigger an NCAA championship ring is than a peasant SJHL championship ring. It's funny because sometimes they'll be sitting side by side and then she'll just put mine on like the bottom shelf. Like that doesn't belong on the same shelf. So
just to make you just a little bit less, just to make you feel like less of a man.
She still, I'd have to look up the stat now, but up the day of our wedding, she still led all NCAA women's hockey and block shots in a season. And so when all the Melford guys showed up to my wedding, all the guys that played and all the guys that I had invited, they're all hockey guys, right? And they're like Googling my wife and trying to figure out who she is or whatever. Her and Riley Boomgarden got talking, and Riley Boomgarden's one of the best defensemen to ever play in Melford and one of the biggest characters. And he's like, he couldn't have been that good, whatever. And she pulls up that stat and he was like, oh, okay. All right, you can sit and drink with us. Like, and I was like, great. She's got more in common with the hockey guys than I do.
And so you mentioned you finally leave Melford, you go to Verdun. Yep. How long did that last for? Kind of, any interesting stuff you want to tell us from Verdun? Because I do want to get into your time in Branden, because I'm sure you've got some great stories there.
Okay, I got one good one, and you guys are going to love this. I have never told this publicly before.
Oh, God. So, are we going to get in trouble?
I don't know. Maybe. It happened. I can tell the story. It happened. Okay, it's a true story. It happened.
We're not big enough to get in trouble, man.
Yeah, that's true.
This is a true story. Every word of this is a true story. So the year Melford won the championship, Melford played Weyburn in the first round of the playoffs that year. Weyburn had a coach by the name of Bryce Toma, who is now, I think, scouting for Detroit or St. Louis.
Oh, yes.
Okay. He'd gone on to coach in Saskatoon, and he was Brent Sutter's assistant in Red Deer. So Melford was the 1 seed, and Weyburn was the 8 seed or whatever it worked, and like Melford was the better team by a long shot. So I go to do my pregame interview. I've never had an issue with this coach, Bryce Toma, and we do the interview. But the whole interview, do you guys remember? Okay, let's go back. Do you guys remember that Switzerland Canada World Junior interview where the Switzerland coach was like, "Yeah, we don't stand a chance. We're not going to win this game." Yeah. He basically did that the whole interview. Like, I still have the interview. I've kept it all these years in case this comes back to bite me in the ass. But it was like, Melford's going to win. We don't stand a chance. There's no hope in hell of us even coming close. Like, and so I finished the interview and I'm like, you sure you don't want to do that again? Like, and he's like, nope, that's good. And I'm thinking, that is the strangest interview. And then I kind of got thinking, well, maybe it's he's just downplaying it, whatever. So anyway, I played on air and I had a few people text me saying, boy, that was odd. That was a very weird interview. And I said, yeah, okay, whatever. So in the playoffs in Melford, long before I ever got involved, they came up with this thing called the Trash Can Clan. And it's basically elementary and high school kids that bring metal trash cans. Still a thing, yeah. They bring metal trash cans, and they sit behind the visiting bench in the playoffs, and they bang on the trash cans. Like, it's a Junior A historical fan thing. It's awesome. It's great. So game 1, there's probably a dozen of the Trash Can Clan behind there, and this is the first time I'm ever seeing of it. And I mean, granted, I'm running the business, so I sold some tickets to a parent who bought like 12 or 15 kids tickets behind their bench. And I was like, oh, great. Like, make as much noise as you can. Right on. So they bring their trash cans, and I'm kind of laughing, thinking, oh, this is cool. So game one, they are loud. Like when you're banging on a metal trash can right behind the bench, like it was loud in there, but it wasn't even a full house. Like there was maybe 1,000 people in there. So Melfort wins 7-1. Just throttle Weyburn. Just throttle him. And as Weyburn's leaving the ice surface, Bryce Toma looks up at me and he gives me like the throat slash. And I'm like looking around like, is that me? Like what did I do? I'm the radio guy. So I'm doing the radio or whatever. Do my post-game show. And at the time, my girlfriend in Melfort's like waiting by the door and I can tell something's off. And she's like, there's that guy. He's waiting at the stairs in a suit. And he looks mad. And I'm like, oh God, what's this all about? So I come down the stairs and it's Bryce Toma. And he is wound up like a top. And I'm thinking, why does this have anything to do with me? I'm the radio guy. So in my head, I'm like, okay, don't pull a Doug Johnson and react like you did on the Nipawin bus. Let's handle this like men. Ignore him and walk straight to the bar area where the entire board of directors is standing so that anything that happens, there are multiple witnesses is what my thought process was. So I come down the stairs. I walk right past him. Don't even give him the time of day. First mistake. So he is hot on my heels and he is just in my ear, like whispering though, not yelling, like passive aggressively whispering in my ear about how shitty I am and just a bunch of things that I can't repeat in my ear. And I'm just like, what is happening? What did I do? So we get closer and closer to, and I can see there's a bunch of board members having a beer and drinking. And my boss, the president of the team, is watching this exchange. So he's kind of walking towards us. And right at the very end, right before both parties intersect, he says something that I won't repeat into my ear and I'll lose it. Like it's one of those things where if any of you guys heard it, you'd snap too. Okay. So I snap and I'm like, you little, and I start giving it to him. And he turns 360 and says to my president, you need to get your guy under control. Like total mind game. Like he's been after me this whole time, but nobody heard him, right? That's why he wasn't yelling. It was a mind game. So everyone just saw him walking behind me. But then when I snap, all anyone sees is me losing it. So now he looks like the good guy and I'm the bad guy. So at this point, I'm like, what are you mad about? And he's like, you put those kids behind my bench and you played that interview on the radio. And I'm like, well, A, I asked you if you wanted to do it again and you said no. And B, you said it, I didn't. So, and I said, I didn't put those kids there. They bought tickets. Like, and I didn't buy them the trash cans. Like, they've been here for 20 years before I ever came. So like, just play better then. Like, just be better. So anyway, we get into a little pissing match, shouting match. And my president at the time, Sean Iceberg's like, okay, enough out of you two. Like, break it up. So he pisses off and he's madder than a hornet. And I'm thinking, okay, that's the end of that. So we go down to Weyburn for game 2. And at this time, I'm half prepared to have some sort of confrontation. And so I get to the rink and I go up into Weyburn's press box area and there's a security guard standing by the door, big, tall guy, like 6'8". And he goes, you're not allowed in. And I was like, oh, great. Here we go. So I'm like, okay. So I go down and at this point, our president had called Bill Chow, the league commissioner, and explained to him about the confrontation the night before. And Bill said, okay, I'll talk to Bryce and, let's not have this happen again. Great. So I go down and I say to Dwight Kolchiski, Melford CM, I said, okay, what do I do here? The security guard says Bryce isn't letting me in. Dwight goes, phone Bill. Bill's already aware. Just phone him. So I call Bill, tell him what's going on. He goes, okay, I'll deal with it. So anyway, a couple minutes later, Bill says, okay, you're good to go. So I go up to the press box. I start setting up my stuff. I get all set up. Everything's plugged in, working. I go down to do my interviews with our guys. At this point, I'm not interviewing their coach. I know that's not going to happen. So I just give up on that thought. And I go back up. All my stuff's unplugged. My power bar's missing. And they've got 2 extension cords plugged in. And the only 2 spots I can plug in running all the way down to the other end. So there's no place for me to plug in. And I'm looking down and there's 2 players for Weyburn at the other end. And they're just like sheepishly like trying not to make eye contact with me. And I was like, who did this? And they're like, And I know it was Bryce. So I just unplug their shit and I plug in and I do not leave. I don't even take a piss because I know if I leave, they're going to screw with something. So anyway, game happens. And at this point, the conversation in the community of Melford has started to escalate. People in town have heard about, oh, geez, Weyburn's coach got mad at Crowe. Like, what's going on? He's mad about the kids. So at this point, I get back to the office getting set for game 3. And I've got a message on my phone from one of the parents of the trash can kid. And he says, we heard what happened. The kids want to back you up. Sell me every seat behind the bench. Every seat behind the bench. And I'm like, okay. So I sell him every seat that wasn't a season ticket holder behind the bench. And I'm thinking, okay, this is fine. And and I'm like, okay, whatever. So game 3 comes along, and now there's 30 or 40 kids with trash cans behind the bench. And some of them have like their parents' pots and pans. They're going nuts. And somebody, I believe it was Fountain Tire or one of the sponsors, had hooked up a train horn to an air tank behind the bench. And so like you can't even speak anymore on the Weyburn bench. Like it is obnoxious, and it's probably over the top obnoxious, but everyone is loving it. And this filled the rink. Like the fans are loving it. And so game 2 comes, and he's like standing on the bench with his hands over his ears. That's how loud it is. So he starts yelling, and he's yelling at the refs, telling the refs to get the fans out of here. And the refs are like, what are we going to do? Like, we can't throw the fans out. They're just fans. Like, if they hang over and they, you know, if they mess with the bench, yes. But if they're just making noise, we're not going to throw a bunch of teenagers out. So anyway, that game happens. We win again. We go down to Weyburn. They win a game. So we come back to Melford. And at this point, it's a chance to clinch the series and move on. Well, now the local sign store has gotten involved. And now there's the section behind the bench, and now the section beside it of like 80 kids. And they've got T-shirts made, Trash Can Clan, and the RCMP had to put out a thing on social media asking kids to stop stealing trash cans from people's backyards. Because every old lady's metal trash can just disappeared overnight. Every kid, Home Hardware sold out, Canadian Tire sold out. The kids were stealing trash cans. So they had shirts and everything. And this parent, I can't even remember which one it was. He's a teacher at the high school. And so it's hard for me to understand he's condoning this behavior. So he comes up to me, he's like, I got an idea. And I said, whatever your idea is, I don't care. I'm going to let you do it. Do whatever you want. I can't get in trouble again.
I don't want any association with this, right?
So I go up to the booth, and at this point, there's, I want to say 80 to 100 kids. And
in
these
this one
kids are
section,
rabid, like full up on Mountain Dew and just going bananas. Like to the point where people coming in from outside the building could hear them banging on the trash cans with this horn, and it was unsafe. I honestly want to say it was unsafe for like the people around's ears. I'm not even kidding. That's how loud it was. So I get up there, and these kids are acting suspicious during warm-up. And I'm like, oh my God, what are they doing? So they've got all their trash cans, but they're not making any noise in warm-up. They're dead silent. After, they got all riled up, and then warm-up, they're dead silent. And I'm thinking they are up to something. So they had it worked out so the Weyburn coaches had to walk across the ice looking at this display getting to the bench while the lights go off. Teams come out. The 2 coaches for Weyburn step out on the ice, and every kid from under their seat pulls up a face mask of the coach's Bryce Thomas angry face over their face. So now there's like 100 kids with angry, yelling Bryce Thomas face masks over their face. And you can tell he is just like at this point, his tie is like right off, and we haven't even played a minute of hockey yet. And he can't even function. Like it is obnoxious in there. Like it was the loudest building I've ever been in. Even compared to Western Leagues, 10,000 people did not make the same amount of noise as those kids did. Branden wins the series. That was the end of it. He moved on to Saskatoon. And so he's in Saskatoon. I never, it was funny. We laugh about it, joke about it, whatever. So I go to Verdun. The next year, we're playing Weyburn in the preseason. And I'm thinking, okay, we got to get this over with. Like, be like men, we'll shake hands and get over it. But I'm like, I got to get one more shot in. And this is where I think I went wrong with Bryce Thomas. Okay. I put one metal trash can, just one, upside down behind Weyburn's bench before this preseason game. And so when he walked into the rink, the first thing he saw was a metal trash can behind the bench, and he was livid. So as the time goes on, I get to Branden. He's in Saskatoon. And the first time I ever knock on the door of the coach's office in Saskatoon, he's like, okay, so picture you guys are the outside wall and the door is here.
Yeah. So
he leans back in his chair and he opens the door and he sees it's me, doesn't say a word and just slams it in my face. And so later on, Dean Brockman, the coach, who I've had a great relationship with from my time in Humboldt, says, you 2 guys have to make up. Do the interview. You 2, I'm going to make you do the interview. And he wouldn't do it. And to this day, I ran into him the other day in the hub, wouldn't even look at me. So
wow.
And it all started with that goofy interview and the fans being too loud. So if there is ever a Junior A story of Junior A stories and how the community can rally behind it, that was it. Because they had him, a grown man, a bunch of teenage boys had this grown man so out of sorts, he didn't have a clue which way was up or what period it was. Like he wasn't even watching the play anymore. In the clinching game, I don't think he watched the game. He wanted to get out of there so bad. So
I mean, you talk home ice advantage, right?
Oh my God.
Like that game
lights came on for the anthem. The game was over. Like, and I talked to a lot of the guys. I'm still in a group chat with a lot of the players that were on Melford side. To this day, like some of them have gone on Division I, some of them have played pro. They still talk about like those kids were absolutely bananas. Like I can't even begin to explain. Like if I was a parent and I saw my kid, like they were like monkeys at the zoo, man. Like they were just like hanging off. They were jumping around. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And they were so in his head. It was unbelievable. It was it's one of the coolest stories I have. And the fact that still to this day, like 7 years later, when I run into him at the Brand Center, he still won't look at me, knows that it still irritates him a little bit. That I find that kind of funny.
Well, we're running out of time. I know that because I know Ty has other stuff he needs to do today. But we do want to talk about your time in Brandon with the Wheat Kings, WHL, kind of a big deal. First off, how did you manage to get into that position in Brandon?
So when I was in broadcasting school in Brandon, I spent my summers and my weekends working in the CKLQ newsroom, just reading news, just helping out wherever. And at the time, they had longtime play-by-play guy Bruce Lubke was his name. He'd been there for 20 years. And when the job accident happened, I asked him. I said, "Look, I want to stay in Brandon. I don't really want to leave." He said, "Look, if you want to get into play-by-play, you got to go, man. Like you got to go and just try it. Go do some stuff elsewhere. You can't just stay at home." So his advice sent me out to Melford, and I'd had a relationship. Obviously, I'd been there for 2 years on a casual position, so I knew the people at the station, and I knew a few people around. So I'm in Verdun doing my thing there. I'm driving to Brandon one time to play golf. It's summertime. I'm going to Brandon to play golf with a buddy, and I get a screenshot of a tweet sent to me from the Brandon Wheat Kings that says, "It's unfortunate to hear of the circumstancing surrounding the whatever of Bruce Lubke's end of his career. We wish him the best of luck moving forward." And I was like, shit, Luber's done. He's gone. And I didn't know anything about where he was going or what was happening, but I was like, so I knew that I had to act quickly. So the screenshot of that tweet, the tweet had been sent from the Wheat Kings account at like 2:21 and sent to me at like 2:23. And by 2:27, I was on the horn calling the GM of the station. And he answered, and I said, "It's Branden Crowe. You know why I'm calling." And he was like, "I wondered when you would call. I didn't expect it would be this fast." And I said, "What do I got to do? I'm your guy. Like, I will be your guy for the next 30 years unless I get a pro job. Like this, you hire me tomorrow and I will be there. Like this, there's no one else for this job." And I really put all my eggs into one basket. Because I mean, growing up as a kid, that was my team, right? And I always wanted to move closer to home. I have family in the area, friends in the area. I thought if I get this job, that's unless I go pro, that's where I want to be. So I tried to sell myself. I said, "Just hire me right now. I don't care. Give me the number, whatever it is, I'll do it. You don't have to do an interview. I'll save you all the time and the effort." And he was like, "Oh, I appreciate it, but the company policy is we have to go through the process." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'll send you my stuff." So I sent him everything I had. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And then he said to me, "Could you come in for an interview?" I said, "Sure." So I came into the interview and I did the interview as if I'd been hired already, which it could have gone either way.
Bold.
Did we lose him?
I think we lost him.
Crowe, where'd you go?
Oh, no.
I just tried to sell myself and it worked. So it was one of those things where it could have went either way because I went in there like full on. You guys are going to hire me and there's no other way about it. And
Wow.
so recently I went through an interview process with a pro team, and in the process I was basically a finalist for this job. And so I'd gone back to the radio station and said, like, we got to find a replacement for me if this comes through. Like, so they showed me all the people that had applied for that job. And there was like 190 people that applied for the job in Brandon. And that surprised me. I didn't know that many people would be interested in a job in middle of Manitoba, but that shows you how many guys want to get into the Western Hockey League. They were coming from all over, like Ontario, the US, everywhere. People were applying for the job. So I'm lucky I got it. And here I am. So
Now, we could ask you dozens of stories about the Brandon Wheat Kings because obviously 2 Philadelphia Flyers. I'm a diehard Philadelphia Flyers fan, so on and so on. But I do want to hear any stories you have about Kelly McCrimmon, if you've got any really good ones.
Yeah, what a guy.
You got a few.
What a guy. There is no better hockey man in the world than him. And we just had him on our team podcast here this week. And he's a type of guy, though, like when you sit in a room with him and he talks, everybody listens because he's just got such an aura around him, and especially in junior hockey. Like he's won so many things and he's just been such a big part of it. So 2 things. The one piece of advice he gave me that has always stuck with me. After my first year, we had a year-end meeting. I just wanted to talk to him about what was going on, what he thought, and everything. And he said to me, look, I'm going to put it simply for you in a way that you can understand. Hockey is not life or death unless you want to be good at it. And I was like,
wow,
like mind blown. So he gave me that piece of advice, and that has always stuck with me because it really, when you look at the sacrifices guys have to make to go pro, players, coaches, radio, everybody, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. So that was one piece of advice he gave me that I've always had stick with me. But the funniest thing, okay, so here's a good story. This is my first year with the team. I'm in college working on the game staff for the team. So just like part-time, like $20 a night, like throwing out t-shirts and chips, right? So that's kind of the first introduction I ever had to Brandon. It was just a little part-time job. And so before the home opener, they asked me to come and hang up the rally towels on all the seats, like 5,000 seats. So I said, sure. So I came down there at noon, hung them all up, hadn't eaten. Then we had a game and I was like, man, I'm so hungry. And I'm walking past like the dry room where the players have like all their food and stuff. And I'm like, man, I need to eat something. So I was like, okay, there's nobody here. I'm good here. So I sneak into this room. It's all for the players. They're not quite here yet. Still a little bit early. And I grab a bagel and I'm like just about to put cream cheese on it. And I just hear like, and I turn and there's Kelly McCrimmon standing there staring at me. And he just gave me the head shake and then walked away. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know. Am I fired? Like what happens now? Like I'm in trouble now. He never said another word about it. And I never heard a thing. I got my $25 that night and I kept working for the team, but I never heard another word of it. But I'll tell you, a simple grunt, a simple cough, throat clearing, I've never been that scared of a human being in my entire life. But that guy has done a lot for me. He's helped me a lot in my pursuit of trying to go pro and help me get some interviews and point me in the right direction. He's a guy, honestly, it's hard for me to even believe, but I can text him a question and usually within an hour, he's back to me already. So it's pretty cool to have that guy in your corner. He set up, here's the thing. One last story. So one of my good friends in Verdun, Brett Braybrook, he's got 2 young boys, Jackson and Avery, and they, 7 and 5 maybe. Well, they were huge Zach Whitecloud fans when he played in Verdun because he was such a big personality. Now he's obviously having a great season in Vegas. So Brett was taking his boys down to Vegas for Christmas. And he said to me, hey, I know I don't like asking for stuff, but is there any way maybe like you could get us a tour of the practice facility or something? And that's all he was asking for, was like just a tour on an off day of their workout room kind of thing. Let the boys get some pictures. So I called Kelly and I chatted with him for about half hour. And I said, look, I don't like asking for things, but like, is this possible? And he's like, yep. Give him my number. Tell him to call me. And I'm like, okay. So I gave my buddy Brett Kelly's personal cell number. And anyway, they go down to Vegas. I kind of forget about it. I'm not thinking about it. All of a sudden, Brett obviously gets back into Canadian service and he goes, dude, that was unreal. And I said, well, what happened? He goes, well, I called him and he got us down for practice while practice was going on and then brought the boys into the room and let them hang out with the players. So the boys are like, these young kids are like hanging out with Fleury, shooting tape balls at him while he's in his stall, like hanging out with Ryan Reeves. And because they were playing the Islanders that night, who had Ryan Pollock, another Brandon Wheat King, they ended up getting, after the game, they got to meet Ryan Pollock, get autographs from a bunch of the Islanders, and get like pucks and flags and a whole bunch of other stuff. It was unbelievable. And he didn't have to do that. He doesn't know these guys from anyone, from you guys. But all because I said, hey, these guys would like a tour. He went way over the moon for these guys. And he made those young kids Christmas. Like that Christmas will go down as one of the greatest Christmas of their lives because they were shooting tape balls at Marc-Andre Fleury on Boxing Day. Like what a crazy sequence of events, and man, that just tells you what kind of guy he is. To be able to do that for 2 people, 3 people he doesn't even know. So the he's a great man.
Well, Crowe, that's a great story to end on. I love chatting with you, man. Like we could go on for hours on all this stuff, and we'll have.
Yeah, but I got another half of a sub that you bastards wouldn't let me eat.
We're gonna let you go eat it now.
I've got to drink my diet Pepsi because I got to keep my figure nice and thin for my suits here in the hub that nobody sees because there's nobody in the building.
Oh yeah, exactly. But I appreciate you taking an hour on short notice to hang out with us. Chat with us, tell us some great stories. It was an absolute riot. We'll have to have you on again. Thanks
Here's
for
the
doing
thing.
this, man.
If Bryce Toma hears this and beats me up in the hub tomorrow night, like whenever this airs, if I am like taking a leak in the Brandt Center and I get like clocked in the head by a guy in a Detroit Red Wings jacket, it's all your fault. I'm just saying that.
I'll take that. We'll take it.
Just saying that.
Yeah, we'll take it for sure because this was awesome, man. Thank you again.
You bet, guys.
Yeah,
good work.
We'll have you on again here at some point.
Yeah,
I know you've got a lot going on at this point in time. So
we'll get you and Toma on together and we'll squash the beef once and for all.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great.
It would have to be via Zoom because I don't know if I'd want to be in the same room as him.
Well, that's a pleasure, and honestly, cheers, and
keep doing what you guys are doing. I like your stuff. You guys are you're unique in a sense that you really don't have a avenue. You know what I mean? Like I don't take offense to that. I mean that in the most complimentary way. You guys, like, on any given week, I have absolutely no clue who you could possibly be talking to. So I like that. I like bouncing around. Like it's you guys do some good stuff. So keep it up.
If it's hockey, we've got it.
Exactly.
Right to the Icelandic national team.
Exactly.
There we go.
We'll let you go enjoy your sandwich. Hopefully
cold
they didn't
now,
make you a tuna and hot
Hopefully it's
sauce.
not tuna.
It's cold now, though. Yeah. That's fine.
All right. Thanks again. Have a good one. Cheers.
See you guys.